Hey guys, I want to bring you a breaking development about the Charlie Kirk shooter, the evil, sick young man who shot Charlie Kirk and left his daughters or his children to grow up without a father. Well, there's been this huge dispute online about who is this guy, what is his motivation, why did he do this sick, evil thing, and there's been some contradictory evidence, right? There was early reporting that certain things were written on some of the bullet shell casings. There was a statement from his friends that was initially reported, then retracted. And some people have suggested, particularly progressive or liberal types, this was actually a far-right shooter, a shooter motivated by some sort of alt-right ideology aligned with Nick Fuentes or the Groypers, but they've denied that, and I've been skeptical of that, though you can't rule anything out. These kinds of people tend to be unhinged, and often have ideologies you cannot really neatly map on to one side or perfectly predict. But we have a new report from the Wall Street Journal that I think it doesn't conclusively settle this matter, but it really strongly suggests what most of us initially suggested, which is that this is a radical leftist who killed Charlie Kirk. So this is from the Wall Street Journal, reading here, Tyler Robinson's descent from promising student to murder suspect. The 22-year-old suspect in the killing of Charlie Kirk spent much of his time online and had become increasingly political, according to relatives who say, I have no idea why he did this, but the governor of Utah says something else based on his investigations so far. So reading this article here, Tyler Robinson was the pride of his Utah family. He was a 4.0 high school student who won a prestigious college scholarship, according to social media posts. His options are endless, his mother wrote on Facebook. What a horrific tragedy that a kid could come from such a nice family, from everything it seems, being raised right from what we know so far, and yet somehow be indoctrinated, whatever political valence it had, into some sort of fringe ideology like this. But anyway, and then end up becoming a monster. That's actually really scary, especially I'm sure it is if you have kids. More from the article here. 4 years later, authorities say the 22-year-old Robinson used an old bolt-action rifle to fire a single shot that killed Charlie Kirk, while the conservative activist spoke Wednesday at Utah Valley University. He allegedly had ammunition etched with phrases borrowed from internet and gaming culture like, hey fascist, catch, and if you read this, you are gay, LMAO. So, hey fascist, catch, I mean, to me, that was always a sign that this was like a left-wing Antifa type, most likely. Now you could say, well, he said you're gay as an insult. That's not very woke. Yeah, but like the left, the far left is often almost edgelordy and they don't care. They say offensive stuff like that. Anyway, more from this article. Authorities, friends, and even his own family, and I'll link to the article in the description, guys, but it is paywalled, so I'm getting you behind the paywall here. Authorities, friends, and even his own family were trying to understand how Robinson went from a top student raised by parents who were registered Republicans in a Mormon stronghold in southwest Utah to a suspected assassin who authorities said targeted one of the country's most popular conservative youth leaders. Robinson was in the past registered as nonpartisan. So Tyler's uncle says he has no idea why he did this in a text exchange. That was Friday morning with the Wall Street Journal. However, Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who is a Republican, said that one of Tyler Robinson's family members told investigators that Tyler had become more political in recent years. The family member said at a recent dinner, Robinson and a second relative discussed Kirk's coming outdoor event on the Utah Valley campus in Orem. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had, Cox, a Republican, said at a news briefing Friday. I want to talk about this briefly because whether the shooter here was leftist or far right or whatever, no one really denies or seems to disagree about the fact that he killed Charlie Kirk for his political opinions. This was not some unrelated thing or based on some apolitical conspiracy theory. He was murdered because of what he has to say. And that is just so un-American, so evil, and so sickening. And so I believe Charlie Kirk is a free speech martyr. I do. And some people have dismissed that idea, but how can he not be if he was killed for speaking his mind? That's all he ever did. It's the only crime he was ever accused of. You could disagree with so many things he said, and I did at times. And I disagreed with how he said them at times. but we have a right to speak our minds in America, and he was killed for exercising that right. That makes him a free speech martyr to me. Now, here is the big deal, the big kind of revelation from this Wall Street Journal article. So it is very clear to us and to the investigators that this was a person who was deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology, Cox said in an interview with the Journal. So this is the Republican governor of Utah telling the Wall Street Journal that it is very clear to him and to the investigators from their research so far and investigating the shooter and the family that this guy is a leftist. To me, that makes it close to settled, not settled. Well, of course, so much more information will come out in this investigation. But like, I would say that this Utah governor, you have to understand, Spencer Cox is not a Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Okay, he is not some bombastic MAGA troll. He is a very serious, thoughtful, and bipartisan governor, guided by, I think, his Mormon faith in part. And so he would not just say that without evidence or without reason to believe. So for me, that takes us to 95 plus percent certainty that this was a left-wing shooter. And I think that fact or that revelation should really prompt some introspection on the left, because I've talked about this. Most Democrats, most liberals in kind of professional politics and in punditry have come out against this shooting, and thank good for them for doing that. But the Democratic Party, I mean, we talked about polling on this channel from the Network Contagion Institute. You can look it up or go back and see it, showing that pluralities of left of center voters in America would support, or at least think it's partially justified to assassinate Trump or Elon Musk. We've seen the whole cult of Luigi, where they simp for this alleged murderer murdering a healthcare executive in cold blood just because they think he's hot and they hate our current insurance system. So apparently extrajudicial political terrorism is fine and dandy in that situation. I mean, this is sick. There's like this violent element to the far left. And I think a lot of Democrats have disavowed it, and that's good, but they have to reckon with this. And yes, of course, you can talk about political violence on the right and Republican unhinged rhetoric, and that absolutely exists. But when you have a left-wing person assassinate a MAGA star, it is not the time to talk about but Republicans. Okay, it's the time to look in the mirror, all right, and seriously grapple with this, because we can't do this. This will destroy our country. I really firmly believe that. There's more to it than just this. There's also an aspect of this that even if this guy was a far-right person, which now, like I said, because of this breaking news, this reporting, I think is clearly not the case, but even if it was, this is a guy who was radicalized by the internet, who was like obsessed with memes and weird, edgy pockets of the internet and their discourse and their language. And like, the best thing we can do is spend less time on the internet. And I'm a hypocrite on that. I spend way too much time on social media, but I turn my phone off for hours every day, almost every day, to spend time with my partner who I love, right? He and I were at a restaurant last night. My phone was off for more than 2 hours, just enjoying the moment, being present. I try to swim now that I'm in Florida and just spend half an hour with no phones, no headphones, anything, and just with my own thoughts. When you spend your time dwelling constantly in these fringe echo chambers, whether it's the leftists on Reddit, whether it's the far right people on 4chan or now on X, I mean, there's just sickness and madness there. The best thing we can do for young men is encourage them to spend less time online, less time on social media, and build more connections in real life, more hobbies, more friends, more volunteering, more real world stuff. Because the internet, it's really a diseased culture in so many ways. Now, there's beautiful and positive things that come from the internet and social media as well. I do believe that. But there's also a really, really consistent problem with radicalization. And that's obviously what happened to this sick young man. And I think if you have a young man in particular, though it goes for everyone, it goes for women too, but men are more likely to commit these kinds of atrocities, you got to help them unplug. You got to help them establish boundaries and a healthy relationship with social media, because most people don't end up this bad, but it just has such a deleterious effect that's so clear at this point from the social science and just from every single human person's anecdotal experiences. So I'm really hoping we can learn from this. We can just step back from this incendiary constant culture war, from these online fringe echo chambers, reconnect with each other as human beings. And I also think that now that we are pretty certain this was a far left shooter, again, I do trust Spencer Cox, and I could be wrong. I'll come back on here and say so if I am. But I don't think he would just say that. I think it probably means that this shooter is, in fact, what we suspected, a left-wing radical, maybe potentially Antifa type. And I think the left should reckon with that. There's ugliness there on their side. There is a culture of mocking and belittling violence and memeing support for assassination. And it's just not who we are as Americans. And we can disagree about every issue under the sun, but we have to be able to agree about nonviolence and about coexistence and about free speech. We have to be able to agree with that to coexist and remain a civilization. So I hope we can come to a little bit of common ground on that. Guys, thank you for joining me for this video, for this breaking news update. Do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Hit that like button, yada, yada, yada. It's been a really tough week for me as somebody who does this professionally. I mean, I'm 1/100th of the relevance of Charlie Kirk, but I do kind of the same thing, right? Talk about my political opinions, exercise my free speech professionally, and I say things that offend some people. I've had far left and far right come after me and threaten me and all sorts of terrible things over the years. So it's just a scary time to do what I do and feel like there's actually a significant portion of the country that'd be okay with someone killing me too. I don't know. It's really dark, but I do appreciate the support and engagement on my content, guys. And I will be bringing you any more updates on this horrifying story. Once again, my thoughts and love goes out to Erica and to the Kirk family and friends and everyone. And I'm so sorry that this happened, and I'm still sickened by it, honestly. But we'll be back with more content soon, guys.